Hi guys, Aaron here with Ghost Raptor Gaming and Guns. And if you ever bought a gun because of a video game, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because that's kind of what happened here. Today we have the H&K USP in 40 Smith and Wesson. Now, first and foremost, what is my relationship with H&K? I don't have a relationship with H&K. They don't even know that I exist. They didn't send me this gun. And in fact, I didn't even buy this gun. This particular firearm is on loan from my friend Jordan, who actually bought the gun because he loved it in Call of Duty. But we'll talk about that a little later on in a little more depth. So first thing that you should know about this gun is just some initial specs. It weighs 1.65 pounds, unloaded without the magazine. It has a 4¼ inch barrel. Now typically the initial runs of these guns have polygonal barrel, but then in 1994 I believe it was, they switched over to standard kind of traditional rifling. It is a nitride finish gun and it is rather durable. There's no scuffs, marks, scratches really on this gun. The finish is holding up really well. This of course is the 40 caliber version, but there is a 9mm and a 45 version as well. Now we're going to go through this gun the way I always like to go through the gun, which is front to back, top to bottom, and I talk about those features and caveats of those features as I go. So we're going to start with the sights like we always do. The sights are a 3-dot variety. They are rather squared off. Equal height, equal light is easy to achieve, and I actually really like the sights quite a bit on this guy. Very good. No complaints there whatsoever. Now, the slide is actually tapered on like basically every surface. It's tapered slightly on the front towards the muzzle, as you can see right there. There is no front slide serrations, which is something that I like on a gun because the front slide serrations drive the cost of the gun up and they cause you to put your hand near the muzzle of the weapon, which is never a good idea. Now it does have lightning cuts here and it does have tapers on both sides. It's very much a squared off pistol, as you can see. And I really, really like the aesthetics of the gun overall. Your extractor is here, it's long, it's thick, and I generally like that because I think that external extractors tend to be a little more reliable than an internal extractor, and they're also easier to replace should you need to. Slide serrations on this guy are not great. I think that was a miss on the H&K's part, and it's just because if you look at the slide serrations, you can see that they are fairly far apart, and they're really shallow. You don't get like a really good purchase on the slide. That being said, you can do it no problem, but your hand almost, especially once you reach most of the way back, your hand just wants to slide right off of it. So the slide serrations leave something to be desired, but overall, not that bad. Now your hammer isn't exactly a bob type. There is a spur here on the hammer, and it is fairly easy to actuate. As you can see here, it is serrated in nature. Pretty good hammer overall, okay? Not that I really think you're going to need to be cocking this gun manually, but as you can see, you can do it no problem. Now, we talked about the sights, the slide serrations, and the hammer. Let's go to the dust cover. So the dust cover is dumb. It is a full-length dust cover. However, as you can see right there, it has a proprietary rail system on there, which means you need to get dedicated accessories for this to fit this rail, or you need to get an adapter. I think that's a dumb practice that a lot of gun companies do, and I wish they would stop doing it. The slide lock slide release is good, but almost useless, and we'll talk about that. So as you can see here, it is long. It has these long striations on it, and it's pretty easy to hit with your dominant hand. However, two things about it. Number one, I almost didn't need to use it. It was actually, like I said, basically useless. And the reason for that was I put about 33 magazines of ammunition through this gun, at least 30 of those reloads. When I inserted a loaded magazine, the slide automatically dropped. So I didn't even really need to use it. I only needed to use it 2 or 3 times. And when I did, unfortunately, I had to do it with my offhand. And what I mean by that is upon reloading this firearm, I would insert my magazine like so, and then roll my thumb up and hit it. Now, why did I need to do that if the slide stop is so elongated? The reason for that is simple, and that's a feature we're going to talk about right now, the decocker safety. So this is a 3-position decocker safety. Up is safe, and by the way, you can carry cocked and locked if you wish, and you don't need to take that off to unload the gun or disassemble the gun if you don't want to, which is rather a nice feature. So top position is safe, middle position is fire, down decocks, and it does automatically pop back up. So that's a pretty good safety system. I like it. So if you want to, you can carry cocked and locked, or you can decock and then turn your safety back on and have your safety on and then your first shot be double action. But why don't I like it? Well, it directly interferes with your slide lock. As you can see here, it's really, really wide, okay? And it protrudes much further than your slide lock does. And so what happens is you can't just drop your thumb down and hit that slide lock. It will push your hand away from the frame of the gun in the slide lock so you can't actuate it, which results in one of two things. You insert your magazine and hit it with your offhand, like I just did, or you actually have to break your grip slightly in order to drop the slide. Not that you really need to. As I said, most of the time when I was firing this, reloading this firearm with a loaded magazine, slide just dropped home. So I didn't need to really worry about it, but it is something that you should be aware of in case yours doesn't do that. Now, the trigger guard is elongated. It is very large. It's very easy for you to get gloved hands in there, as you can see right here. And it's a military and police geared firearm, so that makes sense. Also, it is angled at the front, not really squared off, but it is serrated at the front. So if you want to get your index finger up there on your offhand and hook that trigger guard, you can. I have small hands, so for me that's kind of impossible. It's going to slide off no matter what. But if you have larger hands and you like to shoot that way, go ahead, you can do it. Now, before I get into the rest of the gun, if you like what you see so far, go ahead, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you want to support the channel a little bit more, hop over to Patreon. $1 a month really helps me out. If you're not into the subscription service, I do have a GoFundMe on right now. $500 is the current goal. Link in the descriptions for all that stuff. So, how about the trigger? Well, H&K didn't put a great trigger in this gun. This is the second worst double action trigger I've ever felt in my entire life, second only to the 1895 Nagant revolver, which is saying something, because if you've ever handled one of those, you know the trigger is absolutely abysmal. So the trigger on this guy, double action, is, by the way, just going to clear it one more time. So the double action trigger on this gun has like a 0.5 millimeter of take up right there. You immediately start having more take up, and God, is it bad. It's got to be all of 11 pounds easily. It's kind of gritty, it's long, it's heavy, it's stagey. It's really a terrible, terrible trigger. And your brake on that is literally all the way back, by the way. It's a terrible trigger. Single action, considerably better, right? So let's talk about that. So single action has just a little bit of take up here, about 2 millimeters, and then you hit a wall, and then a pretty clean brake. It comes in right at about 4 pounds. If you're interested in your reset, if you shoot the reset, here it is right here, and the reset is all the way out. As you can see, if I move my finger, the trigger doesn't move at all, and then you do have take up. So reset is all the way out, and then you do have just a little bit of take up there. So single action isn't the best that I felt, but it's really not bad. Okay, so single action is good, double action is absolutely terrible. Moving down from there, we have an ambidextrous magazine release. It is on both sides, and it is a European style, which means that it's a little lever right there on both sides on the trigger guard. Now, that means lefties are going to like this gun, because as I said, most of the time when you insert a magazine, the slide just drops. So you don't gotta, you don't gotta grip and rip this thing. Basically, you can just drop your mag in, boom, slides forward. Okay, and then it's ambidextrous, so you can just use your dominant hand if you're left-handed to drop the magazine. So lefties will like this gun. However, you do have to break your grip to drop the magazine. with your thumb. You don't necessarily need to break your grip to do it with like your middle finger or your index finger, but it's still pretty awkward, right? And if you train to use your thumb all the time anyways, you're just gonna have to adapt around it. Do I think it's much slower as a result? No, not really. You get used to it pretty quickly, actually. I just wish it was a little further back and a little easier to actuate. Now, the grip on the USP is absolutely my favorite part. It's absolutely amazing. I love it. So, this doesn't have interchangeable back straps. It doesn't have interchangeable side panels like, say, the P30 or I should say the P30L or the VP9, which I believe both have them. But it is stippled on both sides, which is really nice. Good side texturing, but the front and back strap is really where it matters, right, guys? So, the back here has some really deep, aggressive checkering, as well as the front strap. And so, as a result, you get a really good grip on this gun. It's a very ergonomic gun, and it has a really good grip as far as texturing goes, so that's really, really good. The other thing I like about it is it does have scalloping here on the bottom, so if you need to strip a magazine out, you can get your fingers in there and strip that bad Larry right out. So, pretty damn good overall. The magazines, by the way, are 13 rounds. That gives this, this particular gun a capacity of 13 plus 1 or 14 rounds. And overall, it is really good. The ergonomics are just fantastic. The grip is fantastic. I like a lot of the different features about this gun. Overall, it's pretty good, but how did it shoot? Well, let's hop over to the tabletop and I'll show you how it shot, and we'll come back and talk about it from there. So let's talk about accuracy with the USP in 40 Smith and Wesson. How did it do? Well, let's find out. So, this is me, cold, 7-yard standing, with S&B 180 grain full metal jacket. As you can see, I have just over a 1-inch group here. That's pretty good. I have 2 within an inch, and then a little bit of a flyer here. This, ignore that. Here you have about 1.5 inches. Here you have about a 2-inch group. So I'm just kind of getting used to the gun, and it's not great so far. But as you can see here, again, this is me, 7-yard standing. This is mixed loads. And despite that, there's 2 right here. Ignore that, that's just me, that's a flyer. This one, not so great. Here you go, 2 1/2 inch, and then 1 just over, so about 1.25 inches there. This one, you have 2 within 1 inch, and then a flyer, again, that's just me. And then 3 rounds in a 1-inch group. So that's pretty good right there. And again, that's with mixed loads. Here, this is me, 7-yard standing, 180 grain arm score full metal jacket. You got about a 2-inch group right there, 1.5 inches. Again, 2 really close, and then 1 flyer. This one's not so good, and then 2 within 1 inch, and that's a flyer. That is just me. There is some trigger mastery required on this gun. How about PMC Bronze? PMC Bronze. This is the 165 grain variety. This is just over a 1-inch group right there. Here you go, you got 2 right, like I said, within 1 inch, and then a little bit of a flyer. That's totally me, don't worry about that. Here you go, how's that? I would say that's about a 1-inch group, 3 rounds. And then you have 2 here, and then a little bit of a flyer coming out to about 1.5 inches. And then here's the really impressive one that I saw. This is also PMC Bronze, 165 grain full metal jacket. So there, 2 almost through the same hole, and then a flyer, that's me. This one's this one's that one's But right here, we have 3 rounds well within the 1-inch mark. 3 rounds right there. And that is pretty much what I think is indicative of this gun. I think that the USP 40, with a little bit of practice, is easily a 1-inch MOA gun, 7 yards standing. So, as you can see, 1.5 inch groups are fairly typical with the USP 40, but it's not too difficult to get 1-inch groups. So it is a highly, highly accurate gun. But how is its reliability? Because that's just as important, right? Well, I'm about to piss off a lot of H&K fanboys. This particular model failed reliability testing. My standard reliability testing that I do is 500 rounds, and I allot for 1 failure in 500 rounds. As that is the typical NATO standard, they allot for the same thing. I think it's one failure every 495 rounds. So I rounded up to 500, 1 failure in 500 rounds, and this had 2. My first failure was a simple one, wasn't a big deal. Basically, tap and rack cleared it. Basically, all of that was a failure to go into battery. It just didn't pick the round up, and all they did again was tap and rack, and it chambered the round. That was, by the way, Fiocchi Range Dynamics 170 grain full metal jacket. The second failure wasn't as easy to clear. In fact, it was a really hard failure. It was a failure to extract. That was with Armscore 180 grain full metal jacket, and generally I've had good luck with Armscore except for the 22. I had some keyholing with the 22 during the Ruger Wrangler review, so go ahead and check that out and you can see what I'm talking about. But as far as all the centerfire ammunition, I've never had a problem with it. And what ended up happening was it had a failure to extract completely. It didn't even pull the casing partially out. It was completely jammed in there, and then a live round tried to feed in behind it. So I had to actually strip the magazine, drop my slide, rack it, and then once I racked it, it ejected that round, reinserted my magazine, chambered another round, and went right back to firing. But unfortunately, at least for my testing and my standards, it failed reliability. Now, that's probably not typical of all USPs. In fact, a lot of them have gone 20,000 plus rounds without any kind of failures. So generally speaking, they are reliable guns, but in my experience, it did fail that testing, right? Now for one thing I absolutely detest about the H&K USP, and that's disassembly, reassembly. So let's go over to the table and I'll show you how that works, and we'll talk about it from there.
Disassembly reassembly of the H&K USP is a fairly standard process. It's very similar to the process you would use to disassemble a 1911 CZ75 or something like a Smith and Wesson 5906. First things first, make sure the firearm is clear. Next thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to line up your slide lock with the disassembly notch, which is in the slide right there. And then you're going to need to remove your slide lock. Now, it is important to note that this can be a real burden if you don't know what you're doing, and what ends up happening is this is very stiff, and I end up resorting to the use of a simple flathead screwdriver in order to pry it away from the frame and out of the firearm itself. Once you do that, you can carefully let the slide go forward, and then you can actually push it forward with your thumb to remove the slide from the frame, as you can see here. Then you can simply clean your frame, do whatever you gotta do with it, but I just put it to the side for now. And then I upend the slide. Now, you have to be extremely careful removing the guide rod and recoil spring assembly from this firearm, because the recoil spring is extremely stiff, and if you just let it pop out of there, it will fly across the room, and then you're gonna have to pick it up. Once it's out, remove the recoil spring from the guide rod assembly, and you'll note that there is a smaller secondary recoil spring here. It is very stiff, and that was specifically designed by H&K to reduce peak recoil forces of the .40 caliber round and reduce parts wear on the firearm itself. So a neat little feature. Put that to the side, push your barrel forward, and then lift it up and out, just like every other semi-automatic handgun that's out there, essentially. And then you can lubricate it, clean it, do everything you gotta do, and put it back together. Reassembly is the exact opposite. You're just gonna slide your barrel in, down, and forward, and then bring it to the rear, locking it in place. You're gonna put your recoil spring back onto your guide rod assembly, make sure it goes all the way to the rear. You have to make sure that this notch is facing up, and then you're gonna really struggle with this part like I did. It is extremely stiff. It is extremely hard to get this thing back in and lined up, and it sucks. So you're gonna struggle with it, as you can see, but once you have that in, make sure that you hold it in place, especially when you go to reassemble it onto the slide, because occasionally it will pop out, and again, like I said, it'll go flying across the room, and you're going to have to pick it up, clean it off again, and then put it back in. So here, I believe I have it right in place. You'll note that I hold it with my finger and then my thumb to keep it in place. Slide the slide back onto the frame. And then again, it's very simple enough. You're going to bring the slide back to line up the disassembly notch with the slide lock pin. I like to start it and then bring it back and line it up, and then it just should snap right into place fairly easily, and the firearm is now back together. Do your function check.
So, as you can see, it is really kind of a pain in the ass to take apart and put back together. Really putting it back together is the difficult part, because that recoil spring is extremely stiff, and that's probably due to the fact that the USP was designed around the 40 Smith and Wesson cartridge, and that's why it also has that extra recoil dampener in there. Really, that was just designed to stop wear and tear on the guns, but it also helps reduce the felt recoil on the gun. And I did notice the difference between like other 40 caliber pistols that don't have that system. But unfortunately, it is extremely difficult to line that guide rod back up and get that thing to stay in place while you reassemble the gun. Absolutely detest that about this gun. So disassembly to reassembly is a pain in the ass. Would I buy it? Well, I wouldn't buy it new, that's for sure. $1,100, and then failing my reliability testing, I don't think that I would buy it for that money. Maybe used, which is what my friend Jordan did. He got this for, I believe he said $600. So that's not bad, but if I can get, say, a P30, a P30L, or even a P2000 for the $600 or $700 mark new, which is a direct evolution of this gun, why would I not get that one versus getting this one, right? And there's also a lot of other combat-proven, reliable handguns out there. You got CZ75s, you got P10Cs, you got Glocks, and you got M&Ps, you got all sorts of other guns that come in right around that $600 price range new and have been as reliable or more reliable than this gun. So yeah, I probably wouldn't buy it. Do I like it? Absolutely. I think it's cool, I think it's ergonomic, I think it's accurate, I think it's powerful. I just wouldn't be comfortable spending $1,000 plus on a gun when I can get a Glock and it'll do the same thing. So sorry HK fanboys, don't mean to piss you off, but it is what it is. And I think that about wraps it up. Just I want to say a quick thank you to my buddy Jordan for lending me the gun. Thank you, Jordan, for that. He also provided 100 rounds for reliability testing, so thank you again for that. My mother, I'd like to thank her. She donated 100 rounds to the review. My friend Suzette actually donated 150 rounds, and then the rest of the ammunition I purchased myself. So it was very cost effective for me to do this review. If you're interested in supporting like that, let me know. Just shoot me a message and we can work something out as far as, you know, buying ammo or targets or something like that, and then I can pick them up at a gun store. Something along those lines. But thank you for your support. Thank you for tuning in. And you guys have a nice day.